I met her at a dance. I remember she was very cold, so strangely beautiful. I swept her up and carried her home. Resurrection Mary, wander from your cemetery. In 1931, she was struck down by a speeding car. On her way to a ball, she was buried with her dancing shoes on. Resurrection Mary, wander from your cemetery.
The Ballad of Resurrection Mary. Nocturnal Relation.
Nocturnal Relation.
Was it all a dream? Was it all a dream? I don't know. We'll have to ask the ghost hunter himself, Richard Crowe, just in from a cemetery. Hello there, Mr. Ghost Hunter.
How you doing, Eddie? Happy Halloween,
Happy
guy.
Halloween to you, too. This is the most important day of the year for you. And you've just come in from where?
In fact, we just wrapped up a tour, and the last stop was out in Brookfield, a haunted Italian restaurant that I found this year.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Have a full crowd tonight?
Full contingent, and we had this new reticulated bus here, the seat 70, so I had a larger crew than usual, and everybody was in rare form. Good group.
Nothing better than picking a Richard Crowe supernatural ghost hunt on Halloween night.
And I had friends of mine, Kim and Frank DeBenedictis, back 13 years in a row tonight, so certainly want to mention them. They couldn't make it down here to say hello, Eddie, but they've been down to see you before, so a lot of good people back again and again.
If you want to go out on that Halloween tour, you probably ought to book it in advance, well in advance.
Well, the Chicago Historical Society's booked me 2 years in advance now for a weekend near Halloween, so yeah, some of the people are thinking ahead. Of course, Halloween has become such a major holiday for a party time. I mean, it's like St. Patrick's Day and New Year's. It's right up there as a party time activity.
How long were you out tonight? How many hours?
5 hours, 7 to midnight.
And you make how many stops during that time?
I try to make 13 locations on each tour, Ed. I think 13 is a nice ghostly number here to take in, and then out of the 13 locations, some sites are drive-bys and some are stops.
Whenever Richard is on the program, we always have to give a little bit of history so you know what this is all about. You hear me debunking psychics on the radio, and you hear me putting down faith healers and so on, and then here I am sitting with a man who I call a ghost hunter. Richard is an explorer. Richard is an investigator. Richard has got a very, very solid foundation in terms of history and urban folklore. So this is more than just a hobby for him. This is his life's work. This is what he does. It goes back to his days at DePaul University when the first ghost tour was born as part of a school project. I always have you tell that story. It takes a minute or two, but I think it helps establish who you are and what this is all about. So we go back to DePaul University to a young student by the name of Richard Crowe, who developed this whole thing for what purpose?
Well, actually, and ironically, I just had a woman on a tour that I did for the Berwyn-Cicero senior group the other day, and she was on the first tour back in '73. So I still bump into people who come back again and again, and some of them from trip number one. The whole idea behind a ghost tour, I can't take credit for, but I must give credit to my geography professor, Dr. Richard Hauck. Now, back in my DePaul days, I earned my BA and MA in English literature. It was just a few hours short of a double major with geography, and was very close to various members of the geography department. And it was my reputation around campus, as you know, my notoriety as the person who knew where all the ghost lore and folklore was to be found, where it came to cemeteries, right, the cemeteries, the murder sites, the gangster material, well before Geraldo came to town and all the other exploitation here at some of the sites. I was part of my my whole image. I really got into that stuff, and I was so well known for that kind of material around campus that my geography professor one day would ask me to put together a tour of the ghostly geography around Chicago. Now, all of us thought it was going to be a one-time trip only. One-time tour. We'll do it for the society, do it for the university. Boom. If we get lucky, we'll have a busload, and that would be it. But once the word got out, it really spread. It got picked up by the old Chicago Today that did a half a page on it, and suddenly the university's been flooded with phone calls. People wanted to take that trip. So by the time we ran that first tour for the university, we had a 200-person waiting list. And I then acquired a couple of buses, thinking it was just a slight aberration here, that we'd do a few more trips, and that would be it. So I ran 2 trips on my own, and without the university's backing, I figured I'll just do a couple to take care of the overflow. They didn't have any interest to continue, and it's never stopped. As you know, Eddie, I now have day trips around Chicago by bus, night trips around Chicago by bus, boat trips during the summer. I've called you from the exotic places I go to.
Yes.
I do trips to New Orleans now, voodoo and supernatural New Orleans trips. I'll be doing that's trip number 7 to New Orleans in '91. In '91, I'll be doing trip number 3 to Salem, Massachusetts. And you followed my career, you know where I go, and boom, there's an interest out there, a real craving for this kind of material.
Our WGN phone number, if you want to talk to Richard, is 591-7200. We'll take a break for a moment. Richard's got some interesting stories to tell tonight. We'll have him tell you the story. Resurrection Mary's got a news story from the South Side that we will share with you as well.
You won't believe your eyes this week at Jewel, because we're having a half-price sale, and you'll find a wide variety of favorites priced at half off. What'll it be? Farm stand pistachios, or golden ripe bananas, a 6-pack of Coke or 7-Up favorites, limit 8 with a $10 purchase, or a half-gallon carton of Copenhagen gourmet ice cream. That's just a sampling of the savings you'll find at the half-price sale through Wednesday at Jewel.
For 40 years, the House of Rattan Furniture has been a store to shop for rattan and wicker in the Chicago area. Shopping a House of Rattan stores in Morton Grove and Lombard is truly an education. Experienced salespeople show you the top lines of rattan furniture: Fix Reed, Pacific Rattan, International Wicker, and House of Rattan's own Superior brand, made right here in Chicago. Make the most important living room in your home. Make the living room the most important room of the home with the most comfortable rattan seating pieces from the House of Rattan. House of Rattan unbeatable prices include completely living room groups from $799, a set of 3 glass top rattan nesting tables for just $99, plus many floor samples reduced so low that they are sure to sell fast. The furniture that is more comfortable than anything you have ever experienced. Shop the House of Rattan in Morton Grove on Dempster, 1 block west of the Edens Expressway, and at Lombard on Roosevelt Road, 2 miles west of Route 83. Beautiful rattan and wicker furniture at exceptional prices from the House of Rattan.
You're back with the Night Owl on Denny's Till Dawn. And tonight our assistant engineer, Sparky, has volunteered to tell you all about the great new meals on the Denny's late night menu. Say hello, Sparky.
Hello.
But in order to spice up the show a bit, first we're going to tie him up in this straitjacket here.
We are?
And then we're going to lower him upside down into this 15-foot tank of water.
Hey, wait. I never agreed to...
Now drop him in. Okay, he's in the tank now. Go ahead, Sparky.
Well, first, of a plenty bit of a gibbon slitter.
With eggs, hotcakes, bacon, and sausage, that's right.
And a never remedize and chili fries.
That's chili, French fries, and cheddar cheese. Very good, Sparky. Well, there's a lot more on the menu he could tell us about, but first let's take a couple calls. Go ahead, you're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to know how he does that.
Pretty amazing, isn't it?
Does he know how to clean a swimming pool?
I'll have to ask him that. Anyway, we're almost out of time. Thanks for tuning in to Denny's Till Dawn. So, Sparky, how's the waterman?
Well, I never winter shrinking.
Garlic time. Now, you think maybe you'd wear garlic when you're out ghost hunting, but garlic is being rediscovered all over again by the scientific and medical community. In fact, over 1,800 scientific papers have been published on the healthy aspects of garlic. Recently, the government has developed a $20 million program to study the health benefits of medicinal plants, including garlic. Well, today's garlic is Kyolic, Kyolic. I think I need some from my voice. Kyolic, the only sociable, odorless, and organic aged garlic extract. Kyolic comes in liquid, tablets, and capsules. Kyolic is the garlic for your health. The cold and flu season is here, so be sure to take some health insurance. Kyolic odorless garlic formula 103 or Kyolic liquid extract available at these fine Fruitful Yield stores in Cicero at 6126 West Cermak Road and in Lombard at the Village Plaza on Roosevelt Road. We now return to our special guest. At 5 minutes before the hour of 1 a.m., the ghost hunter himself, Richard Crowe, wearing all black, I might add, has arrived here at WGN Radio with his stories, his experiences, his answers for perhaps some of your questions, whatever they might be. So give us a call if you want at 591-7200. This 50,000-watt ghost show comes to you from spooky, haunted downtown Chicago, where the spirits are awake. See anything in those cemeteries tonight, Mr. Ghost Hunter, while you're around?
Eddie, a number of things are going on. It's been an incredible week.
We have a number of calls coming in. I'll tell you what, I guess the most famous of them all is Resurrection Mary, the hitchhiking ghost. I played this song about her before, and I'm sure that everybody that goes out with you asks about this story, and you always go by the cemetery where this story originated. Has anything more come up in the last couple of years about who this young lady may have been? Her identity? Do we have any better idea who Resurrection Mary is or was?
Eddie, it seems that the more information that comes in, the more confusing things get. Just that there is no one person that we can pin down as being the Resurrection Mary. Although different people have put forward different girls over the years, my whole approach to the subject is not to try to bend the information to fit one theory, but just to try to assimilate as much data as I can. And I think there may well be more than one ghost, which would be a very interesting aspect to this. And I have to tell you about what happened last Friday. We had a full bus. We were approaching Resurrection Cemetery, coming up Archer from the Stevenson. We got off the Stevenson Expressway at First Avenue. We had just been in the city, and we're going out to do the south suburban stuff. And I was talking about things going on at the so-called Resurrection Triangle. And, of course, the Resurrection Cemetery area is a giant isosceles triangle formed by Roberts Road, Archer, and 79th Street. So as we're approaching the cemetery, I mentioned that in the past, things have happened at the mausoleum. The lights go on and off during the night, and other things like that occur. The alarm system sometimes triggered in the middle of the night. I've heard from people off the record that work at the cemetery that these things have been going on for some time. And as we approach the cemetery, you can't see the mausoleum until you clear a stand of trees. We got up to the mausoleum, 3/4 of the lights were on, and as soon as we got even with the cemetery, boom, 1/3 of the lights went off just as we hit it. Screams from the back of the bus. Some accused me of having a button that I pushed, which of course would be nice, but no such invention. And it really perked up everybody there suddenly. We all got back into the mood very, very quickly.
The officials that run Resurrection Cemetery are not at all happy with the stories of Resurrection Mary. Over the years, they've done everything they can to not add to the story, haven't they?
Actually, just over the years, I mean, we're talking a 50-year period now of ghost stories. some earlier administrators were not as reluctant to talk about it. It's to me, it's just totally beyond my comprehension of why people can't relish and take to heart a story like that. And I don't know. Sometimes people just seem to be a little bit short-sighted in what they'll accept and not accept in the way of material like this. It's the same with other locations around. There's certain other locations around where the current people in charge may not be too keen on the publicity, but you know, a long time after they're gone, the legends are going to remain.
If the Resurrection Cemetery officials would let you in to examine their records, would it be possible to maybe shed a bit more light on this?
Well, Ed, I've been working on gathering material now for a number of years, as you know, and it's often very hard to try to go back in a mountain of paperwork and try to find specific facts about a certain individual. But I've checked, for instance, with archdiocesan material and such, and maybe someday there will be some breakthrough. But in the meantime, I think what's important is not maybe so much the paperwork of the past, but just chronicling what's taking place now at some of these locations.
So as far as the Ghost Resurrection Mary is concerned, we cannot, with any knowledge right now, actually come up with a name she lived in life with any definite conscience.
Well, we can come up with a few names. That's the whole situation.
Oh, really? We've got several, huh?
Right.
We're going to pause. We'll be right back with the ghost hunter himself. Your questions, his stories, all on WGN Chicago, our annual Halloween program. I'm Ed Schwartz. Gene Durretti in with the latest news. At a minute after 1 a.m., Gene Durretti. And it may be November 1st, but it's still my Halloween program until we're off at 3 a.m. Thank you, Gene, but it's still my Halloween program until we're off at 3 a.m. Thank you, Gene. Richard Crowe, the ghost hunter, is with me. Richard and I, we're going on a field trip here in a couple of minutes. Richard and I are going to take a portable microphone, and we're going over to the election board and say good morning to all the ghost voters. Hey, I'm sorry, I was saving that one all day.
That's okay.
In Chicago, of course, you don't laugh at that. It has more truth to it than fiction, I'll say that much. It's 1:07 a.m. Our WGN phone number is area 312-591-7200. So you began your ghost tour in 1973. I began my career as a talk show host in 1973, and we've been doing radio ever since. As long as I've been on the radio, you and I have been doing programs.
That's right, Ed.
And we've been sharing stories and telling stories and sharing your experiences and answering phone calls. But no matter what we talk about and no matter how many calls we get and no matter how many appearances you make, for some reason, Resurrection Mary, the hitchhiking ghost, remains the most favorite, the most famous, I guess, and the most sought after of all the spirits. Resurrection Mary is a young girl, or supposedly is a young girl, that, according to the rumors, got killed one night on the way home from a dance. How far back does this story go, and where did it originate?
We're talking about the early 1930s, Ed, and we're talking about a real South Side staple, because I first heard about this story growing up on the South Side of Chicago, and heard about it quite a bit around the 47th Street area, 47th and Ashland, right in that general vicinity, which the area's changed quite a bit these days, but some years ago was pretty much of a Polish-American neighborhood. And according to legend, Resurrection Mary died coming back from a dance, as you say, was buried in Resurrection Cemetery in South Suburban Justice, which has 130,000 graves. It's a big one. Perhaps the largest cemetery in the whole Chicago area, and certainly one of the largest ones in the entire United States. And buried out there, she doesn't stay dead, but comes back again to party. And because of the way she's buried, because of the location, I should say, along Archer, well, Archer runs into Chicago, and she can go back to the old neighborhoods where she hailed from, or she can go along Archer out south-southwest, further out to places like the Willowbrook Ballroom, which is still around, still doing a big band music business from time to time on weekends. And a lot of stories around the Willowbrook. And, of course, a story we talked about a number of times involves that cab driver from 1979, when in January of that year, he was driving down Archer after dropping a fare off in the Payless area. He was lost out there in the woods. And he spots at the Flavin Road and Archer Road intersection a blonde in a white dress. He sees her. He asks her if she'd like a lift. His main concern is trying to get his directions, his bearings back to the north side. She gets in the back seat after an offer of a free ride. They're traveling up the road for a few minutes, and she says, this is the place. Well, he turns around to ask her what she means. She's no longer in the back seat any longer. And it was just after 1:30 that he picked her up. In fact, he picked her up right past the Willowbrook Ballroom, and 1:30 is closing time, so it's obvious she had just left the ballroom. So the cabbie, upon having the girl disappear in his cab, is so very, very upset by this that the next day he winds up calling the various police agencies he can track down in the area, Justice, Willow Springs, and so on. He winds up talking to the Willowbrook Ballroom, and he winds up talking to a reporter who was at that time with the Suburban Trib in Hinsdale, Bill Geist. And Bill would interview Ralph, the cab driver, call me in out of 2, and talk to me about it. And Bill would do a long article about Resurrection Mary, about this incident. And Bill told me, I don't believe in ghosts, he said, but after he interviewed the cab driver, he said, I now believe in Resurrection Mary. And so ironic, too, that Bill Geist's last name in German means ghost, Bill Geist, Bill Ghost. And certainly that story gave Resurrection Mary a big boost back in 1979.
What is the original site of the original dance back in the 30s? Was it the Willowbrook?
Willowbrook is one location that's been tied to Resurrection Mary encounters, and another one was a place called Liberty Grove and Hall, which stood at 47th and Mozart. But, back in those pre-television days, people didn't stay put. They didn't sit around like couch potatoes. They went out to go to various dance halls. There were a lot more halls in those days than there are today. I mean, the days of the dance hall and such are pretty much gone, and a lot of these places are now bulldozed and torn down. But, of course, thankfully, the Willowbrook is still around to remind us of those old days.
What is the common thinking as to how she might have died?
The tradition states she was killed in an automobile accident coming back from a dance.
And so she, on Halloween and other times when she's been cited as trying to go back to a dance or get home from a dance?
Very often it's get home around 1:30 or so in the morning, and of course home takes her past Resurrection Cemetery, her current home. But new twist to the story, or different twist to the story, is not just the encounter along the roadway, which is a classic, from the Hitchhiking Ghost perspective. And the Hitchhiking Ghost story, of course, is a real piece of urban folklore. People like Brunvald, the folklorist, would say it's only a story, but I say there are stories and there are first-hand accounts, and there's a big difference between the two. But there are also encounters in which she's seen around the road, seen walking around the cemetery fence, walking around the gate, darting in front of traffic. Now, of course, you can dress up, there's no doubt about that, and pretend to be the ghost out there in the Resurrection Cemetery area, but it's not very good shot that you're going to get away with it. You're going to be spotted, you're going to be apprehended by the local police, perhaps, you're going to be run down by some of the local residents of the area. So that will happen, and very often the people that I've interviewed who claim they have seen the girl are quite adamant that she's doing things which are out of this world, like walking through a fence, walking through a gate, disappearing before the eyes of the beholder. In other words, doing things which you can't do unless you really are a ghost.
If a ghost walks the earth, according to legend, does that mean they're not at rest? I mean, would she be around because she's not happy or not committed to the ground? What's the legend on that?
Well, that's one idea, Ed. However, I've always gone for the more of a libertarian view of ghosts, that they're doing their own thing, and who are we to say stop and do it a different way? One thing I like to do about my presentations with buses, with my ghost tours, is to present a great variety of possibility. I usually tell 13 stories on any one bus, for instance, and part of the reason is not just to try to get out 13 stories and try to just churn out a number of tales, but to show people that the range, the variety of the things that we lump under that category, that generic heading of ghost, is quite varied, and there's all these different possibilities out there. So ghosts can be ghost lights, ghosts can be apparitions that you see walking about, it can be a cold spot, it can be a disembodied voice, it can be combinations of different things, but not just one static type of activity, but a constantly changing, ever in a state of flux type series of possibilities.
After a quick break, we're going to ask Richard about a news story that he's encountered involving Jackson Park on the south side of Chicago, the Lagoon, and the name Clarence Darrow. So we'll be right back with the Ghost Hunter on WGN as it gets more interesting as we continue to weave the web. If you want to take a Richard Crowe ghost tour, we'll give you the address and the phone number in a couple of minutes. So you might want to get a piece of paper. If you want to get the literature on going out on one of Richard's tours, there's a phone number you can call or an address. We'll give you those in a few minutes. With cold nights ahead, what better way to spend an evening than laying out the blankets and gathering friends and family to play any of the great games available at Games by James. Games by James is a host of entertaining games that are a great source of fun and entertainment for your entire family. Games like 20 Questions, Borderline, and baseball trivia are perfect for a night in front of the fire and also make great ways for kids to pass the time on holiday trips. When visiting family and friends or in need of a gift just to say thank you, don't miss come to Games by James. Whether you need a game that will get the people laughing and shouting or something to challenge the mind, Games by James has them all. In the Woodfield Mall or at Yorktown Center, stop in Games by James today. If you can't get out to Games by James, they'll be happy to ship you the game you're looking for. Call them at 708-330-1386. Games by James.
A picture you remembered when a special place, a special friend. Remember, for all the colors life can bring, for good is gold photo finishing in just one day. And right next door, we're Walgreens.
Right now, get a second set of 4-inch supersized color prints absolutely free. Good as gold photo finishing. Next day, next door. Details at Walgreens.
And while you're in Walgreens, oh boy, pick up Head Start vitamins for nutritious hair care from the inside out. Healthy hair, like a healthy body, needs proper nutrition. The radiant shine and extra body of healthy hair don't happen by accident. Head Start vitamins available in the Hair Care Center at your nearby Walgreens drugstore. More beautiful hair with Head Start vitamins and protein tablets. Shop Walgreens, and don't forget to stop by the Hair Care Center and look for Head Start. 117 by 118 a.m. WGN, warm, pleasant morning, very spooky morning. Mr. Ghost Hunter, we have 100% humidity, and we have fog in the low-lying areas. 54 at O'Hare, 57 Midway, 62 in downtown Chicago. 100% of the humidity, southwest breeze at 9, and it's kind of a foggy, spooky morning. Anybody who hasn't been to the Museum of Science and Industry probably is living in a coma. The most popular tourist attraction in Chicago, over 4 million visitors a year, is the Museum of Science and Industry. It is a treasure. However, it's a big place. Not that easy to go through it all in one day. And depending on the weather, I wonder, Rich, how many people have never been on the south side behind the Museum of Science and Industry in the Jackson Park Lagoon area. It's a very interesting area back there. There's an island. There is a lagoon. There's quite a large body of water back there. There's a reflecting pool. And also there's a bridge. There is a bridge in Jackson Park, and it is dedicated to the memory of probably the most famous legal mind who ever existed in Chicago, the late Clarence Darrow. What, pray tell, in the Ghost Hunter's Book of Facts, does that have to do with anything?
Mm-hmm. It's turning out to be one of the most popular news stories on my Halloween specials this year. Now, every year I change my Halloween trip. I do 15 special dates around Halloween, change things around, add some new material, try out some stories. And one story that I got a hold of this past year was the story of Clarence Darrow's promise that if he could, he would return from the dead to the bridge behind the Museum of Science and Industry, the Clarence Darrow Memorial Bridge. And a lot of the information on this I owe to the Reverend Roger Bruin over at the Unitarian Church over there on Longwood Drive in Beverly on the south side, because, you know, he does a one-man Clarence Darrow show. He's quite an interesting character in his own right.
I didn't know that.
And he invited me this past March, on March the 13th, the anniversary of Darrow's death, to attend a commemoration on the bridge back there where Darrow's ashes were scattered after his death.
Now, every year, and they do they not throw a wreath in the water to his
right.
memory?
There were perhaps 100 people, a little over 100 people that were there. A wreath was tossed from the bridge into the water, which is precisely where his ashes were scattered. His cremains were scattered back in 1938. Now, Darrow, of course, was a very, very interesting, colorful character. As a attorney, he took on cases involving Haymarket Riot individuals back in the 1880s. He was born in Ohio, but he came to Chicago and worked on various labor dispute cases here. The Haymarket Riot was when he first started to take on somewhat controversial causes. He was involved in labor cases for quite a while. He broke with labor eventually, and wound up taking some pretty interesting criminal cases. And one of the most famous, of course, the 1924 Leopold and Loeb case. Leopold and Loeb, the two University of Chicago students who had kidnapped a good attorney for them, that they wound up getting life in 99 years, but at least it was better than the electric chair. And in 1925, of course, there was the famous Scopes monkey trial, the Tennessee case in which John T. Scopes, a teacher who was teaching evolution, was defended by Darrow, and for the state of Tennessee was former presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan, and quite a celebrated case. Of course, made it into a movie later with Spencer Tracy and Inherit the Wind, very popular movie. The particular story being the basis of that. So Darrow was certainly involved in some pretty controversial things over his lifetime. And during the Scopes monkey trial in particular, in which Darrow sort of took on a personal vendetta against organized religion as the defense for Scopes, made a number of extremely inflammatory atheistic comments. Darrow was a notorious atheist, and yet he had some kind of a belief in an afterlife. And he told a friend who was a spiritualist that if he could, he would return from the dead on the anniversary of his death and return to where his ashes were to be scattered. And that was the site behind the museum, the bridge that's out there that I was just at tonight. Now, this struck me when I heard this as being very, very reminiscent of the famous Houdini quote, that Houdini would return on the anniversary of his death, which, of course, was Halloween, if he could. And just from talking to people, too, apparently that kind of a pact, that kind of a comment that I'll return if I can, was a very popular type thing to say back in the 1920s and 1930s. And it just, the Houdini connection really fascinated me. So I wanted to be out there. I was there last March on the anniversary of his death. Nothing happened except it rained, and people were just waiting around. But then I thought, oh, wait a minute. What an appropriate thing to get into around Halloween. So I've been bringing groups out there. And Ed, if you've been back there, I'm sure you've been back there in the day, but if you've been back there at night to the site, it is really atmospheric, to say the least. You've got the bridge back there. You've got a couple people maybe fishing. You even got some wild birds, herons and cranes and everything back there that are hanging around that lagoon. And Ed, over the last week, we have seen like a shadow on the other side of the lagoon. We're in the bridge. We're looking right off the bridge where the ashes were scattered. You're looking directly at what was originally the main entrance to the museum, because, of course, the museum was built for the Columbian Exposition, 1893-94, as a temporary building, as you know. And, boy, they don't make temporary buildings like that anymore. And looking across the water, we see the steps. It's almost like a view of Atlantis, because you got the water coming right up to the steps. Yeah. And when it was first used, you had to enter the museum by boat. You had to be brought there by boat to go in. And we have people. I saw a character across there. I saw a figure across there. Other people saw a figure, was there and gone, a shadowy figure. So I don't know. We're going to be trying some infrared photography here and everything else. I got a suspicion this is going to be a hot news story, and perhaps Clarence is back and may well be back around the area there where his ashes are scattered.
Certainly would be the right spot for him, wouldn't it?
It's such a atmospheric spot. And, of course, the thing, too, about Darrow's return, Ed, is that if he returns and it's such a remote spot and there's nobody there to see him, who's going to know? So now that a lot of people are having their consciousness raised here to be on the alert to watch for somebody back there, maybe we'll be getting some Clarence Darrow reports shortly.
One thing that we ought to mention at this juncture, and that is, if you go out looking for something unusual, respect private property rights. Don't go where you don't belong. Don't trample, don't litter, don't do damage, don't vandalize. There are some places that are now off limits that would be interesting to visit that have been so brutalized and vandalized that now the authorities and, in some cases, owners of private property want no part of visitors. And it's all because those who came did not respect the property. 591-7200. Let me answer some calls here for Richard Crowe, our ghost hunter. Hello, Joan. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Good. Welcome to our Halloween Ghost Show.
Well, thank you. I'm calling from Milwaukee. I have a question for your guest.
Okay.
I have I believe I have a ghost in my house, and it unlocks my door. And sometimes I hear it and sometimes I don't. But I was wondering if there was anything I could do. I'm not afraid of it. And I don't know, it's just like I was wondering if there's something I could do to get it. I don't want my door unlocked all night, but it has happened a lot. And I was wondering if maybe there was something I could do, or if you have any suggestions to maybe help, get by this or whatever.
Yeah, that's a new one to me. I've never heard of a ghost that messed around with your front door lock before. It's a new one to me, but if you are a religious person and belong to a church, maybe have a clergyman come over and bless the house would probably be the most appropriate thing to do. Or, if you are not connected in that fashion, I think perhaps just telling the ghost to, leave it alone. Certainly, just a firm stance on your own part would probably go a long way towards that.
Okay.
How many times has this happened?
Oh, well, it's happened. I moved here about a year and a half ago from Chicago, and it's just happened within the last 6 months a lot, like maybe 3 times a week, where I know for sure I have locked my door at night before I go to bed, and then, like, I'll get up, and just for some reason I'll get up and I'll check it, and it'll be open. And there's nobody with keys but myself and my husband, who's working in Chicago, and he's not, anywhere around. He's a truck driver, and he works there during the week.
What kind of lock is it?
It's just it's a door lock on the knob that you just turn, and what I'll do is I'll turn it, and then I'll turn it up to lock it, and then I'll double check it. I'll turn the knob hard to make sure it's locked. And like I said, it's not that I'm afraid, and I have strong beliefs in God and everything, and I'm not afraid to stay here. It's just I don't want to be living here, and I don't want to be where I go to sleep and my door is unlocked.
Right.
It's almost like I get the feeling that maybe if it is a ghost or if it's a spirit that I really truly believe, it's like I'm locking somebody out that maybe it wants to come in and maybe it's going to come home, and I'm like interfering with that. So it's not really a concern, but I was just wondering if there's something I could do to where I could soothe it or calm it or let it know that I'm not trying to keep out maybe what it wants to come in.
Right. That's a very peculiar news story to me. There's no chance that it's any kind of a spring in the lock or anything that...
No, it isn't. I just had in fact, I had the lock replaced in November by my brother, and it's fine.
Oh, you've had the lock replaced and it's still going on?
Yes, it is.
Ah.
This has happened with more than one lock, huh?
No, it's just the front door. It's just
but I mean, even after it happened, then we had it replaced and it happened again.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Of course, the easiest thing to do would be perhaps put some kind of a bolt on, deadbolt on, and see what happens there.
Yeah, maybe you ought to do that. Why don't you call a locksmith, a professional, have them come and put a deadbolt on.
Okay.
And see what happens then.
Right, at least if one lock is tampered with, you'll have a backup, a second one.
Yeah.
Okay, and like I said, it's not that I'm in fear of that, of the ghost or the spirit.
Oh, no, you're not afraid of the ghost.
Whatever.
What some living person might do if they come in, right?
You have more fear of the people that walk the earth than the spirits of the other world.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the call.
Keep us posted.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just thought it's kind of a pun, though. It's what kind of lock would a ghost enjoy more than a deadbolt? 591-7200. Wally.
Yes.
Is this Wally Phillips?
No, it's not. Unfortunately, it's not.
Okay. How are you tonight?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. What do you want to say?
I just wanted to talk to Rich a little bit.
No, I don't. Okay. Now, we can't go all night with one phone call. So
okay, we're not going to do that.
Okay.
But I just want to know, Rich, did you ever see Resurrection Mary?
No, I've never seen Resurrection Mary. I'd love to. I've never seen her. The only thing I've had happen around Resurrection Cemetery is just the observations about the mausoleum, lights on, and things like that.
Oh, stuff like that, huh?
Right.
Well, things with me happened years ago, and my wife is now in the mausoleum in Resurrection Cemetery, and she doesn't walk around the streets or anything, so... But years ago, I've had people, when they died, talk to me in my own house, and my wife thought I was nuts. I mean, she actually thought I was crazy. And that's why I was really concerned. Have you ever seen Resurrection Mary? Because I've talked to many dead people. I'm not a psychic, and I'm not a drunk or something like this. But I've had, I don't know if you call them premonitions or what you would call them.
These would be like omens prior to somebody passing on?
Right, exactly.
And
I even knew when my wife's going to die. And it was a very funny thing, because I knew when I went to the hospital the night before she died that she was going to die. And she told me, don't worry about it. I haven't talked to this has been about 10 or 12 years back now, but I haven't talked to her since or anything like this. They don't come back and talk to me. But I was really... when I was listening to, when I turned the radio on, I said, gee, I got to talk to him. Did you ever see Resurrection Mary? And it was something that really came back to my memories.
Now, this is a family trait, is it? I mean, other members of your family have the ability to do this?
No, I'm an adopted child.
Uh-huh.
All right? I was brought up in the back of the yard neighborhood. And, 47 in Ashland. I was raised on 47 Troop. So I know what you're talking about when you talk about 47 in Ashland. But it's a strange thing, and I live right off Archer right now. As a matter of fact, Archer and Kilbourne. And when I was growing up, Resurrection Mary was a big thing, and we tried to always go see Resurrection Mary. But unfortunately, we've never seen her.
Well, all I can tell you from some reading I've done is very often when people die, the next of kin are so bereaved and so sad that oftentimes they, particularly during periods of sleep, will sometimes feel that the departed have come back to talk to them. I don't know, that's possibly what happened to you.
Yeah, but there was times I wasn't sleeping.
Well,
I had a man, for instance, okay? I had a man, I came home from work, my wife was in bed already. I came in the bedroom, I was sitting there, and the man was standing in my closet. He was standing there and talking to me and telling me, you take care of your wife. Because he liked my wife a great bit. I got a phone call about 6 hours later that said the man died. How do you explain something like that?
No,
He wasn't sick or anything?
No, he
Sudden
wasn't
death,
sick.
yeah.
Well, he was 94 years old, but he was
old.
sick.
Uh-huh.
Well, some things you just can't explain.
Some people have this ability, apparently, and I'm afraid, for better or for worse, you've got something there.
All right, I'm going to interrupt because of time. I thank you for your call. WGN Radio, Joan, you're next.
Hi.
Hi.
I've been waiting for years to talk to Richard Crowe.
Got him now.
Okay, I live on the east side.
Okay.
We moved into our house in 1978, March of 78. Looked at our house in November of 77, but did move in 78. When we looked at the house, there was snow on the sidewalk, you know, walking up the front sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
When we moved in, there was snow on the front sidewalk. We lived here, maybe about a month, and I kept hearing doors slamming, and my husband kept telling me I was absolutely crazy. Snow melted. I was bringing in groceries one day. Written in the sidewalk, like when the house was built, is, the old Smith.
Right.
Are the names Anthony and Stephen, which are my son's names. I only have two boys, Anthony and Stephen. So anyway, the doors kept slamming shut, but the doors would be closed. Or, I knew what doors were open, what doors were closed. And as I said, my husband kept telling me I was crazy. One night, my kids and I were sitting here. We heard our back door that has a deadbolt lock on it open, slam shut, somebody run down the basement stairs. I had a dog at that time. The dog went crazy, barking and growling. I took a baseball bat with me, told my kids if they hear a commotion, run out the front door and call the police. The dog and I went down the stairs, never saw anything, except she kept growling at this one corner.
Mm-hmm.
Called my husband. He was working 4 to 12 at the time. He came home several hours earlier, said to the dog, where is it? She went running right down the stairs, right to that same corner, growling, barking, carrying on. We never see anything. One night, again, we were sitting here in the basement. We had finished the basement, and we had a 5-gallon, one of them water jugs sitting on the bar.
Uh-huh.
And we could hear it like it was rolling, making that rolling noise, and then it falling off the bar and shattering on the basement floor. So the kids and I again went back downstairs and crawling around the furniture, not to walk on the floor to cut our feet or anything. Got a light on. There was nothing wrong. Just, the bottle was sitting there on top of the bar. Nothing wrong with it. I can be washing dishes and I'll feel something brush up against me. We finally named him Harry and just kind of talk about him and call him Harry. And the kids, my kids now are 23 and 21. And my 23-year-old is upstairs. We have 2 rooms, like up in the attic. He says he thinks Harry's upstairs. He's not really bothering us around here anymore. But it's really kind of strange. I don't know whether he's left the house. And, we don't talk about it because he's been around for so long.
Uh-huh.
I don't know whether he's... we did find out. I left out, I guess, one big important part. After we had looked at the house, we found out a man had hung himself in the house.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know what room or anything. We didn't ask, we didn't want to know what room it was in or anything like that. But I don't think it's his ghost. I don't know what it is. What do you think it might be?
Hard to say for sure. You should try some experiments like taking fast black and white film. You could probably pinpoint where in the house it pretty much hangs about and look for fogging on film, streaks of light, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of fun. I kind of enjoy him. I kind of miss him.
Most people do. Well, and you say you miss them, but Yeah, most ghosts are cyclical. They'll be around for a while, they'll go away, come back again, maybe even stronger than ever.
Well, like I said, my son says he's upstairs, but we don't really talk about it that much, you know?
Well, good hunting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a break. We'll be back 1:36 with our friend the ghost hunter, Richard Crowe, at 591-7200. It's 1:40 in the morning. Rich Crowe, ghost hunter, on a foggy morning in now early November. Our annual Halloween show, 54 at O'Hare, 57 Midway, 62 in downtown Chicago. For today, the day after Halloween, sunny, windy, and very warm. High near 75 and very windy all day. When the ghost hunter is out hunting, does the ghost hunter ever come downtown? Is there anything in the downtown area that you show to the people you take out, sir?
Ed, you know, it's a common misconception that the downtown area is too hustling, bustling, noisy, yuppie-ized, but no, there's some good stuff down here, too. In fact, on my nighttime trip, we shoot right down North Michigan Avenue, right by the John Hancock Building, right by the Water Tower. And those two sites, although everybody knows about them as landmarks around Chicago, both of those locations have some pretty interesting psychic and ghost stories connected with them, too.
Can you give us a little bit of something?
Sure. The John Hancock, for instance, it's on Streeterville, as you know, and Streeterville was the land that was created by Cap Streeter, the famous Chicago eccentric, who would beach his boat in a sandbar a century back and invite neighbors to come and dump garbage and fill on that property. And Streeter was notorious in this town for his feuds with the politicians, with the government, and eventually he lost title to the land, or never really had title, but was just driven off from the land. Streeter pronounced a curse upon that property, and for many years it was considered just a journalistic joke, something to be written about during slow news periods. But then in the 1960s, when the Hancock was being put up at Streeterville, that curse story came back again, because I'm sure you might be aware of this too, when the Hancock went up, at that time was the tallest building in Chicago, only one workman died in its creation. And yet, despite the fact that only one guy died when it was being built, after it opened its doors, a series of deaths began to occur involving tenants and their guests. And you probably know about the most famous one of all, the one I'm thinking of right now, Lori Kowalski's plunge from a top-floor penthouse window all the way down to Bonwit Tellers on the main floor. Lori Kowalski would fall to her doom naked from a top-floor penthouse window. She broke through the glass. No one knows for sure how. Officially, it's an accident. But Lori Kowalski's death, one of a series of deaths like that at the time. And besides the strange deaths and things like that that have taken place at the Hancock, we've got the real interesting piece of trivia that born right here years ago was a baby boy before the Hancock was even conceived of. A boy was born in a home here at Streeterville. And this kid would later grow up to join the circus to become a lion tamer and a calliope player, and he would drop out of circus life to enter the wild and wacky worlds of California cults and religions. And that guy we know today is Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, was born right at Streeterville, and is quite possibly one of the strangest byproducts of the Streeterville curse.
Anton LaVey is
Anton LaVey from Chicago, was born right there, and of course more recently, I know you're
the Church of Satan, isn't
he? That's right. He founded the Church of Satan, and he was from Chicago, born right there, and the other tie-in here more recently, the movie Poltergeist 3 was filmed around the Water Tower, around Water Tower Place, I should say, in the Hancock Building. And during the filming of that movie, as in the original two Poltergeist films, a lot of talk about a jinx connected with the movie, that bad luck followed around people connected with it, a cloud seemed to hover over the heads of actors, actresses, filmmakers, whatever involved in it. And of course, in Poltergeist 3, Heather O'Rourke died. Misdiagnosed by her doctors, a tragic, senseless, needless death. Did she die because of a Poltergeist movie jinx or a Cap Streeter curse? Well, something to think about when you're pricing high-ticket real estate on Michigan Avenue, Ed, when you're looking for a condo and rental property, whatever. Bear in mind you can pick up more than just the material side of things on North Michigan Avenue.
I wonder if when your bus is parked outside of the Hancock Center, the residents inside who are looking down upon you have any idea what you're telling the people on the bus who are looking up at them. Oh, boy. WGN radio phone. Hello, Ken. You're on the air.
How you doing, Ed?
Good.
Listen, Richard, in your many years of ghost hunting, have you ever come across gangster ghosts, such as Capone, Dillinger, or the victims of the massacre?
You got it. Where have you been? You should be on my nighttime tour. And the standard nighttime trip, we include both the St. Valentine's Day Massacre site and the Biograph Theater Alley, where John Dillinger was shot down.
You have told a story over the years about the site on North Clark Street at the old garage, where the old garage stood, where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre took place. If I could prevail upon you for a couple of minutes, maybe you would share that story with us. It's been some time since you've told it.
Right, Ed, this is a story that I'm very close to because when a number of buildings were torn down back in 1967 to make way for the retirement home that stands on that block now. That retirement home is run by the Vincentian Fathers, who also run my alma mater, DePaul University.
Let us mention the address. We're talking about basically the corner of around Webster, is it? Or Dickens and Clark?
Well,
2122.
2122 was the
North
address
Clark.
of the SMC Cartage Company garage.
That's where the garage was.
That's where the garage was. And that building and the other buildings just to the north of that on the west side of the street were all knocked down to make way for this retirement home. Our late Mayor Daley, the real Mayor Daley, that Mayor Daley, back in the 60s and such, was really embarking upon a program of knocking down buildings that had a gangster association because he felt that if these buildings could be done away with, then people wouldn't be thinking gangsters and talking gangsters anymore. There wouldn't be something to focus on, something to see. However, in this case, it was a mistake in judgment because the building might be down, but people have talked about it even more perhaps than had the building been left alone. When the buildings went down, this retirement home was built. The retirement home straddles a big section of the block, and at the south end of the building, that's right where 2122 now stands, there's a grassy park-like area in the front and a parking lot in the back for visitors to the retirement home. In the middle of that yard, there are 5 trees. These trees are spaced like the 5 spots on a playing card. From the center tree to the hedges behind it, that's almost exactly where the men were lined up and shot down because they were lined up against the north wall of the building, back room. And you can line it up with buildings across the street and see just where that wall would have been. And once you could walk around the spot, take it all in. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre occurred in 1929. Of course, 7 members of the Moran gang being shot down by henchmen of Al Capone. But for years, you couldn't gain access. People who had the garage wouldn't let people in to see the bullet-pocked wall. But now that there was accessibility, you could stand and walk right over the spot. And in the late 60s and early 70s, a good friend of ours, Joe Triani, who now is with the University Hospital on the west side of Chicago. Joe first brought this to my attention, that people in the area claimed that they could hear sounds at night, sobbing, moaning sounds, which were attributed to the dead gangsters who were coming back to haunt the location. Well, of course, skeptics said, it's only your imagination. You've read too much about it, you think too much about it, it's all in your head. But then it was pointed out to the skeptics that not only do people act up on the spot, but that very often people walking their dogs around the area have observed those animals staring and growling and pulling at the leashes and seeing something taking place that those walking the animals do not observe. So you've got both human and animal testimony here at this point to show that there's something very different, something odd occurring at 2122 North Clark Street, and most people vote for dead gangsters from 1929 as being the rationale for this carrying on.
All right, Pen?
All right. How about Capone? Have you ever heard of any ghosts of him walking around or anything?
Capone, there's a story about Capone being hounded by a ghost. In fact, it's another St. Valentine's Day Massacre spin-off story here, if you will.
Yeah.
Because in 1931, Capone went to see a Chicago psychic named Mrs. Alice Britt, and he told her he wanted to get help to get rid of this ghost who was following him around, appearing to him in his dreams and during his waking hours. This is material that I found in a book in England while on a trip over there, based on a bodyguard's testimony, a former Capone bodyguard. Now, Capone said that he was being haunted by the ghost of James Clark, and James Clark was the brother-in-law of Bugs Moran, one of the men killed in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So apparently he had the desire and the ability to come back to haunt Capone. All that Mrs. Britt could suggest, the psychic could say, would be maybe if you give up your current line of work, take on a new occupation, then maybe the ghost will leave you alone. Well, Capone was not about to do that. And so later in 1931, still living the high life, still being the king of bootlegging, Capone was convicted of income tax evasion. He would be sent away to do time. He did time in Atlanta, and then he was out at Alcatraz when that facility opened back in the summer of 1935. During Capone's time in federal pen, he said the ghost was nearby. His cellmates thought he was just stir-crazy. And eventually, of course, his mind was just gone because of the venereal disease he had contracted earlier in his life. Capone eventually was released from jail. During his days at his Florida estate at Palm Island, he always said that there was a ghost nearby. His family, his friends, his bodyguards couldn't see it, and they thought it was just his guilty conscience, his imagination at work. And yet, shortly before he died, he said the ghost was standing above him, pointing a beckoning finger for him to follow, and he was constantly talking about this. His family, his friends, and others said, you know, it's just Al. But think about it. If it's only his imagination, why not all the ghosts of people that Capone had been involved with having had put away over the years? Why just one ghost? I think the fact that it is exclusively one ghost, I think that lends a great deal of credibility to the story of the ghost who haunted Al Capone to the grave. And I think that the story makes sense when you dissect it that way and look at it that way.
Very good questions, Ken.
All right, thanks. Did he ever finish his book?
I'll be working on that as soon as I get through the Halloween season.
Okay, because I talked to you about 10 years ago.
Right.
Like...
I've been working at gathering stuff for a long time. I promise I'll get to work on it, guys.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, this is WGN in Chicago. 591-7200 is our phone number. If you would like to attend one of Mr. Crowe's tours, your tours last about 5 hours, and you do them all year long, do you not, basically? All year long. During the summer, it even goes by boat. But in the other months of the year, it's by comfortable chartered bus. And here's what you do. Write to Richard Crowe, C-R-O-W-E, Richard Crowe, C-R-O-W-E, and you write to him at P.O. Box 29054. That's 29054, Chicago 60629. That's Richard Crowe, C-R-O-W-E, P.O. Box 29054, Chicago 60629. And if you want to call him on the phone, it's 708-499-0300. That's 708-499-0300. And that's how you get a hold of the ghost hunter if you want to go out on the haunted hustings with Richard Crowe. Ghost hunter visiting at WGN Radio Chicago. And Rich, we're back on the phone. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, how are you doing, Ed?
Good. Jeff, get right in here.
I got a story for Richard. At the same time, I got a question for him.
Okay.
I used to live in this house on the east side of Milwaukee, and this was about 5 years ago or so. And I was in college at the time, and the house was probably, well, over 100 years old, and it was comprised basically of about a basement, main room, and two upper floors. And it was kind of ironic that all the different things that happened in this house happened in like a succession of three. And when I would be home studying late nights and stuff like that, you know, you'd hear the whole bit. I would hear like noises or that appeared like somebody was coming up the stairs, and it was always like three stairs, and then it would pause, and then maybe 10 seconds would elapse, and it would come up again, three more stairs, three at a time. And the noises that I heard, basic clanging and things like that seemed to originate from the basement, always were in groups of three also. And I also would lock the door to the basement. We had a deadbolt, and on numerous occasions I would lock it, and the next morning it would be open. And it seemed, though, that all the noises and the footsteps and everything that we heard were basically in the, like I said, the number three, and I was wondering if that had any significance in any type of the things that you've dealt with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the number three's been fairly consistent in a lot of psychic occurrences, and very often it's a knock. Knockings come in threes quite often as a psychic omen type thing. Three knocks, often a omen, a sign that someone's about to die. The mysterious knocking. Three knocks on the door, you go to answer, nobody's there, and things like that. But three is a very magical number, and I don't think it's a pure coincidence that three has been considered by most peoples of this earth to have special significance. And it's amazing, though, that you've got such a series of threes, though, in one incident, in one series of events.
Yeah, it was real bizarre, you know, because I know on a couple occasions I would go down to see, you know, it seemed like it always originated from the basement. And I would go down to see, you know, if there was something going on, or, you know, what was going on. And basically when I would go down, everything would stop, and that would be the end of it. And we also had a dog, and the dog was real reluctant to go down there. And there was one space, in fact, we didn't find it until probably 5 to 6 months after we had been living there. And
what was I'm watching the clock here, so I'm running short on time. Did you have a question beyond this story?
Basically just about the significance of the number three.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, seems to be something there. Just keep alert. Keep watching.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
very much for the call. Hello, Chuck, you're on the air.
Hi, Eddie and Richard. How are you? That I heard, maybe you can discuss them. The first regards St. Rita Church,
Okay.
and the second is mummies in the basement of the Field Museum.
Oh, they're both
We've done both of those stories
and-
before, right?
Yeah, the mummy story, why don't you go ahead with that Field Museum. Now, if you live outside of Chicago, we are blessed with a beautiful museum of natural history. It's called the Field Museum of Natural History. It's just south of downtown on our lakefront. It is world-renowned for its collection. It's a huge place. And it has one of the largest collections of Egyptology in the United States, or in the world for that matter. What is the story there?
And Ed, you know, they've recently revamped the whole Egypt collection. I don't know if you've been there since they've redone that.
I've heard about they built a crypt in the basement.
Right, they built a crypt and they've rearranged everything, and they've also rearranged Harwa. They've moved Harwa. He's the mummy that has been the focal point of this story now for a number of years. It seems that some years ago, a night watchman heard a scream come from that section of the museum, come from the Egyptian section. When he went to check, he found that one of the mummies had actually seemed to have leaped off its pedestal because it was many feet away from the pedestal where it stood, and this was in a sealed glass case. And that's Harwa. And Harwa now has been moved to a new position, and he's now on display with a lot of the various amulets and Egyptian items there around him. And I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see whether or not he likes his new position or if he is maybe going to give us a sign again. It only happened once, years ago.
Was this before or after the King Tut exhibit?
It's well before the King Tut exhibit, Ed.
That's what I thought.
Actually, well, the King Tut was in town twice, you know. A lot of people don't realize he was here in '65 before the ladder display.
Don't even remember that. I don't remember that.
Did not get the hype, did not get the publicity, and you could go down and see him without the long lines. But, prior even to the original exhibition in '65 of King Tut, this happened. I'd say it probably happened in the 50s, early 60s, although I'd have to pull out my information, my files on that.
It's a legendary story about the Field Museum.
Well, but the Field Museum has written it up in their bulletin on a number of occasions.
There's no denial at all. They don't deny that it happened.
They aren't trying to cover this one up by any means.
And the other one was St. Rita. I'll tell you what, we've got to take a break for news. And I'll tell you what, we'll come back and talk about that, okay?
All right.
All right, Chuck. Thank you for the call. The St. Rita Church story, of course, is one of the most famous. Is that on your regular bus tour, by the way?
And I used it, well, it was actually on tour number 1 way back in '73. And then I used it a few Halloweens back as a special story that I dust off and bring back from time to time. Have not done it this year. I have not done it now in a couple of years, but it is a very famous story.
It is one of those stories that whenever we gather on the radio, whenever you're here, whether it's Halloween or a visit during the year, we always get numerous calls about St. Rita's Church and the story of what happened there the day that the doors slammed shut and the organ played by itself. We'll come back with that. Don't go away. You're tuned to WGN in Chicago, my Halloween show. I'm Ed Schwartz, and the fog tonight was ordered by me as well as the full moon, so as to make the program a little more interesting. Here now with the late news is Gene Doretti at 2:02 a.m. Gene? And thank you, Gene, very much. 2:07 a.m. I'm Ed Schwartz. This is my annual Halloween show. If you were listening earlier, you enjoyed War of the Worlds, and now we're sitting with Richard Crowe, the ghost hunter. And I would also point out something that, of course, you can't tell at home, but since Richard was out on his ghost hunt this past evening, his tour, and it's Halloween, he's still wearing his Halloween costume. And I can't think of a more fitting costume. Richard is actually dressed as a monk. He's wearing a black robe and hood, and he's dressed as a monk. Is this the first year you've worn this costume?
Yeah, well, a lot of people said they were going to wear costumes for Halloween, so I thought I might as well dress up and join them this year, yeah.
But when you walked in with that hood up and everything, I thought, how fitting. This is something you ought to wear all the time.
It's very comfortable. Very comfortable.
I think you ought to wear this one all the time. We have some calls coming in, which we'll get to in a moment. I knew, as long as you were going to be on tonight, that at some point during the show, somebody would call up and mention the parish of St. Rita. And again, if you're outside of Chicago, St. Rita's is a very well-known parish on the southwest side of town. St. Rita's, over the years, very well known for its high school football teams and for the fact that it's a very large parish. But they also are part of one of Chicago's most famous ghost stories, And Mr. Crowe, you know more about this than anybody around. Maybe you'd share it with us.
Okay, Ed, and I was just
and
up
it's
at...
tied directly to Halloween,
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. And I was just out at Northern Illinois University last week, and want to thank everybody out there for packing Sandberg Hall again, and had a number of people from St. Rita's pop up. You meet them wherever you go.
Oh, yes.
And, of course, it came up out there, too, as a topic of conversation. Well, St. Rita's Parish, 63rd Street on the south side, and the church itself, 63rd Street in Fairfield. Real well-known church. It's a very distinctive, beautiful stone church out there on 63rd Street. And a fabulous story grew up around that particular site back in 1960. Now, at that time, it's perhaps one of the reasons why I'm here today, too, Ed, because at that time, when I first learned about it, was one of the stories that really got me going because it happened so nearby. I grew up along 55th Street, just to the north a bit and east a bit from St. Rita's Parish, from Visitation Parish, and heard about this right after it happened. It was on All Souls Day, November the 2nd, 2 days after Halloween. And November the 2nd, of course, is a very, very famous day in the Catholic calendar to pray for the souls of the dead, to reflect upon those who passed on before. And on that particular day, there were people at the church praying for the souls of the departed. They were there praying silently by themselves, no priest officiating, just on their own, when suddenly from the organ loft, which is above the main doors, the south end of the church, from that organ loft, strange screeches and screams came from the organ. The organ was just going off, and those who were in the church automatically, of course, turned to see who could be disturbing their prayers, who could be messing around up there, only to find out there was nobody at the keyboard. The organ was playing by itself. And yet on either side of the organ, there were hooded figures, 3 on one side in white monks' robes, 3 on the other in black monks' robes. When these strange figures were seen, I'm sure probably much like the robe I've got today for the black robe, when these figures were seen, those in the church headed for the side doors of the church to leave. They were so frightened by this, it was time to leave, to beat a retreat from the location. When they got to the side doors on the east and west end of the building, these big metal and glass doors, which opened and could move perfectly easily earlier, were now being held shut as if by some invisible force. They couldn't move them open, couldn't push them open, and the figures that were in the organ loft were now on the main floor, gliding through the pews, getting closer. Panic is setting in when suddenly from inside the church a cold breeze blows the doors open, and at the same time a whispered voice is heard to utter, "Pray for me." Those in the church, now with access available to leave, the exit doors open, left, hastily, didn't really come back for a bit, I'm sure. Were tracked down at the time by the pastor who was there, Father McHale. Many of them were told to keep this quiet. Those who could be identified and talked to were told, for the good of the church, for the good of the parish, that sort of thing, to keep the story mum. But you couldn't keep a story of this magnitude quiet. It soon spread by popular folklore throughout the South Side. I heard about it just a day or two after it occurred at the Visitation. Eventually, I found people who lived through it. One gentleman is now a priest in a South Side parish, and one young lady I knew from my college days. So there were people that I was able to track down. Basically, the story, as I've just described it, is what they've been able to piece together. Now, of course, in a situation of panic, the stories don't jibe 100%, but basically that's how the story came down. And I like the story because, to my way of thinking, it's a classic tale with a moral to it and perhaps even a happy ending. You'd like to think that maybe in time of need, you will be able to go somewhere to a place of worship to request prayers necessary for wherever you are, whatever your position is after life. And hopefully, the symbolisms are very, very blatant, very, very obvious. I like to think that whoever was there was able to leave with the good guys in white robes and not the bad guys in black.
That's a great story. St. Rita's Church here in Chicago. Eric, are you out there?
Yes, I am.
Good morning. Welcome to WGN.
Thank you. Good morning. I was wondering how far into the city up on Archer Resurrection Mary has been spotted, because I live right on Archer and 35th.
Archer at 35th?
Yes.
Actually, I've got reports as far in as, let me see here, probably around Ashland.
Really?
Yeah.
Because, I'm up most of the night. I work most of the night, and I'd come home from work or get out of work early, and I'd walk, because I don't drive, I'd walk down Archer. And since it's so popular around here, you'd see a girl walking on the other side of the street or on your side of the street,
right.
You tend to cross or avoid her because you never know. And and a lot of people said,
you mean you're trying to avoid Resurrection Mary?
Well,
Why?
If you're alone walking, I tend to avoid things like that. You never know.
I'd be walking right over to her.
Well, you're a ghost hunter. That's your job.
I suppose.
And another thing is, my girlfriend lives right off of Clark and Webster.
Uh-huh.
And she's not really familiar with the Valentine's Day thing. So what I would do is I would tell her that the little park by the retirement home was a real romantic place for me. So I would take her there every Valentine's Day. And
how gruesome.
Well, I got a morbid sense of humor, so...
No doubt.
You did that last Valentine's Day?
Yeah.
Well, that was the day of the big snowstorm.
Yeah. She'll do it, so I make her do it, so... I think it's pretty cool.
All right, cool head.
One other location up there, the Chicago Pizza and Oven Grinder Company, which is kitty corner across the street. You know, they put out the story that was the lookout house for Capone's men.
Really?
That they were watching across the way with binoculars.
Yeah, well, they could. You see it far away from up there.
So so if you're looking for a romantic pizza place, check that out right across the street, and you can look out the window and watch the St. Valentine's Day site at the same time.
Well, another thing is too, I work right across from St. Rita. To church. I work right across.
You're tied up with a number of these places.
Yeah. Well, where can't you go in a city where it's not haunted?
You know, that's not a bad observation.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now.
591-7200 is our number. Hello, Tom.
Hello.
Good morning.
How are you guys tonight?
Good.
Have a story and a question.
Go.
Okay.
Okay. Back in March of '73, we moved to an old farmhouse out in the country of Cambridge, Illinois. And my room was cold, and it was a little bit chillier than the rest of the house. And as time went on, they moved me to another room because they didn't think that was good. We thought that it was chillier because of the way the wind was hitting the house. But when they moved me to another room, that room got chilly too. And as time went on, the house started showing signs of being haunted. One day my sister was doing the dishes, and she saw what she thought was my mother, and then it turned out to be a ghost because whatever it was walked right through the wall. And there was one day when they were scratching on a door, and we opened up the door, and there was nothing in there, but there were scratch marks on the door. And around the same time, my mom was pregnant, and she was doing the dishes, and or she was cooking, excuse me. And as she's walking away from the stove, this big, heavy black iron skillet fell off the stove and sort of it glided toward her and fell right behind her and splashed her leg with some hot grease. Well, in late November, the cold moved from my room and moved into her room, and a week to 2 weeks later, she lost the baby. Now, the question is, as times went on, this happened in '73, it's 1990 now, we've moved to many places since then. My room is still cold, no matter where I go. And I was just sort of wondering, I mean, is this usual? Does this happen at all, of something following you around?
Well, does any other bad luck or other things happen besides the cold?
Well, let's see, my sister saw the ghost.
You haven't seen the ghost anymore since you moved?
No, the ghost was only sighted once at that house, and we heard that somebody had killed herself there, like years before we had moved in. You know, one of the classic stories of, you know, people talk about. I wasn't sure whether to believe it or not, though. And I'm just telling you what I remember myself. Other family members talk about other things, but other than the cold moving to Mom's room and her losing the baby, you know, and I don't know if there's any connection in that at all, but, you know, and after that, Mom would not go back to the house. She insisted we move, and so we did.
I just one of those things.
There are cold spots. I mean, that's an established sort of psychic occurrence, cold spots. But cold spots, to my knowledge, are always situated at a spot where something happened dramatically or traumatically and stay put. So I don't know quite what to make about the coldness moving with you. Do other people experience that too, or just you?
No, other people. It's been pointed out to me on how, you know, I'd move to a different house, and then that room would get real chilly sometimes. I'm talking real chilly, 10 to 15 degrees below, you know, the average temperature of the house. And I would move to another room, almost as a joke, and then within 4 days later, that room would get cold too.
That's a new one to me. I don't really know how we could put a handle on that and try to figure that one out.
And it's not something that makes me feel bad either. I mean...
Well, as long as they don't feel bad, I guess it's something you'll just be telling stories about the rest of your life.
Okay.
All right, my friend.
Thank you for the call.
Thank you.
All right, WGN Radio Chicago. Dale, you're on the air.
Hello, Ed. Hello, Richard.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I've got a story for you about a ghost in the old Berwyn Theater.
Okay.
At 22nd Ridgeland Avenue in Berwyn.
Well, I drive by there a lot.
Yeah, and you had the group there tonight from the Berwyn group.
Right.
A friend of mine was telling me tonight, the kid that works on maintenance, he said there was a fellow that was working one night in the theater. He had one of those big blowers that they use to blow the leaves out and all that in the theater to blow all the stuff in the back and clean it up. And he was going through the theater and blowing everything up. And it stopped, and he had the thing connected up in the balcony. So he went up there and he checked the plug, and it was about, I'd say a quarter of a way out. So he plugged it back in, went back downstairs, put the harness on, turned the blower on, blew everything out. He was going for a while, stopped again. Went upstairs to the balcony, and he checked it, and it was about 5 feet, maybe thrown out or so. And he plugged it back in, didn't think nothing. Maybe he pulled it out. And when he was, blowing everything like that, and went downstairs, put the harness back on, started blowing everything back towards the end of the theater, and stopped again. Went back upstairs, was about 12 feet, 13 feet, whatever, away from the outlet. Plugged it back in, didn't think anything. Went back downstairs, started doing his job again. It shut off. Went back upstairs. This time it was thrown halfway across the balcony. So he went to plug it back in, and he heard somebody said, "Get out of here." Well, this guy rushed out of the theater as fast as anybody could possibly do. The end of the story is that in the 1920s, this was an old vaudeville theater like the Century Theater in Chicago or the Granada or any of the other ones. Two men were fighting over one girl, and I guess one of them was killed. And the theater in Berwyn now has been razed. It's gone. But that's what happened at that time. And like I said, this guy never, in his life would have been scared or frightened from something else. But when he heard somebody say, "Get out of here," after the third time that he went, again, the third time like the one fellow before was saying, he just figured, well, okay, it's time, because he was in there all by himself. He was maintenance crew late at night.
I think I'd be gone myself.
I think so, too, Ed.
I don't think I'd hang around.
Interesting. I've heard of other haunted theaters. That's one more to add to the roster here.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we tear down all the old theaters.
Yeah,
there aren't any of them left.
And with the Berwyn Theater, like I said, I've been in there when I lived in Berwyn. I lived there for 6 years in Berwyn. I'm originally from the north side of Chicago. And for a story like this, which is so interesting, because I've never heard this before, and I had him recant it again tonight because everybody was, at lunchtime, about 7 o'clock, was talking about Resurrection Mary and all the other ghost stories and stuff like that. But this one, to me, is so interesting because he was the only one in the theater, a maintenance man. Late at night, he's going to clean up the theater, get all the popcorn and the gum and the other crap that's underneath the, underneath the seats and everything.
Yeah, apparently what he must have done was disturb the spirits of that thing. I must break, but I thank you very much for the call.
One quick question, Ed.
Real quick.
The ghost in the Italian restaurant in Brookfield. Ed, what is it? Or I should say, Richard, what is it?
Alonzi's Villa?
Alonzi's Villa.
Right.
Talk about that.
We'll talk about that, sure.
Please, thank you.
Okay.
Good night now.
All right, we'll come back with that on WGN in Chicago. A quick break. 2:22, and if you've noticed a little fog around this morning, that's in the forecast. Areas of dense fog, just like yesterday. Otherwise, it is fair and mild. 54 currently at O'Hare, 56 Midway, 62 downtown. Humidity is up at 83%. Southwest wind at 7 miles per hour. Today, a Butte. Sunny, windy, unseasonably warm. High around 75 today, with a very brisk southwest wind running up to 25 miles per hour and more.
Hello, everybody. We're here at Cape Canaveral.
WGN Radio, the Chicago Tribune, and Lemonhead Candy are the only organizations that present the official Chicago Bears luncheons every week. There are some knockoffs, there are some copycats, but the only official Chicago Bears luncheon brought to you by us, the Tribune, and Lemonhead Candy. And next week, Tuesday, is coming up at the Holiday Inn Chicago, Madison, Illinois. Holiday Inn Chicago out in Madison. If you'd like to go, I've got a phone number, 222-4753. Call during the day. 222-4753. This week, upcoming, it will star Chicago Bear Ron Rivera and the Chicago Tribune sports writer Fred Mitchell. And the cost is $20 per person prepaid, Visa and MasterCard accepted. And again, the number for reservations, 222-4753 here in Chicago for the only Chicago Bears luncheon. The only official one. 2:27 is the time. Richard Crowe, the Ghost Hunter, is with me. The Italian restaurant that you mentioned a few moments ago, this is a new spot on your tour?
Yes, Ed. It's called Alonzi's Villa, but it's well known, or it has been known in Brookfield for a number of years as the Sanctuary restaurant before this. The Sanctuary had a famous ski club that would meet out there, and last November it was purchased by Mike and Pat Alonzi. Now, their daughter, Debbie Horn, has been on my tours for about, good 12 years now. And Debbie called me and said that her parents had picked up this restaurant and that stuff was going on. They thought it was haunted. I decided, well, sounds good to me. I'll check it out. And some incredible things have been happening out there. For one thing, the place has had quite a number of different uses over the years. Back in the 1920s, this building was a bowling alley. Now, the bowling alley is still there, but it's beneath the dining room floor now. They just covered it over with a new floor. And yet certain people have heard the sounds of a bowling ball going down the alley, striking the pin. So the bowling games are still taking place psychically, apparently, from time to time. Well, Pat Alonzi has heard her name called by a disembodied voice, as have certain waitresses, and as has Debbie, her daughter, and her daughter Tricia. And the interesting thing about the voice that calls names now is that although on occasion it was just a very fast, clipped voice that you could not even guess what gender it is, male or female, calling a name, but then other times the ghost, and this is a very interesting twist, although it has happened before, the ghost is a mimic. In other words, the voice you hear calling your name is the voice of someone you know, someone familiar, a parent, relative, friend, and yet they're not there in the premises when the voice is heard calling your name.
Ooh, that's a spooky thing.
That's downright scary too, to think that the ghost can mimic people. It's like a parrot-type ghost, I suppose you could say, that it mimics certain voices or certain people you know.
Do you still stop by that bar on the north side of Chicago that is haunted, where the spirit of the late bartender drinks at night?
We were there earlier tonight.
Tell me,
the Castle Pub.
The Castle Pub. This is where, on Broadway?
It's Broadway and Thorndale.
Now, this is another legendary spot where something... What happened there? What was the story with that?
We're talking about the only Scottish pub in Chicago, the Edinburgh Castle Pub, known locally to the regulars as the Castle. And it was back in 1959 that the original owner, Frank Giff, drank himself to death behind the bar. And he was doing shooters of vodka, fell and hit his head, died there behind the bar. And eventually the next morning, his wife found him behind the bar dead, buried him, and took over the operation, but then sold the place. And it was purchased by Jane McDougall. Jane transformed the place into a Scottish pub. She brought in a tartan carpet, Scottish memorabilia for behind the walls, and Scottish ales and whiskeys for behind the bar. But she did find out, at first she suspected her bartenders, that large quantities of vodka was disappearing. And she would mark the level of liquid in the bottle with a piece of crayon to find when the liquid dropped. And it was during the night when there was nobody there. So apparently Frank still drinks his vodka. And besides that, something that's been going on again and again, especially the last couple of weeks, is a constant cold spot at the spot where Frank died. Now, not everybody experiences this, but if you sit in the middle booth, back room of the building, around that middle booth, there's often a coldness, a numbness on the floor. Your toes get numb. Your feet get cold. The numbness, the coldness climbs up your feet, up your legs. This has happened to many, many people. And some women, however, get more when they'll get a cold and clammy hand touching them, reaching out, grabbing them on the shoulder, whatever. And I attribute that to the fact that Frank died behind the bar, obviously, figuratively, if not literally, reaching out for his wife, Edna, but she wasn't there for him in his moment of need, and he may well be just mistaken and a little bit intoxicated still after all these years and reaching out and touching the wrong person.
And the levels in the bottles, do they still go down?
Vodka still disappears on a regular basis.
591-7200 is our number. Hello, Charles. You're on the air.
Hello, gentlemen.
Morning.
Happy Halloween.
Yes.
Yes.
I've got a question for you. I work at the Auditorium Theater, and I'm just wondering, with the Phantom of the Opera there, I've heard stories that there might actually be a real ghost story at the auditorium. Have you ever heard about this story?
Well, Many theaters, as we mentioned earlier tonight, have ghost stories connected with them. I don't know specifically of one at the auditorium, but it wouldn't really surprise me. And if you have anything on this, I'd like to hear about it.
No, I can't remember, but I have heard that there is a ghost. There happens to be an underground lake there, just like at the original theater, the Paris Opera, where the Phantom of the Opera takes
There's an
place.
underground lake beneath the auditorium theater?
Yeah. Basically, it's the very old hydraulic system that they used to use there to operate the machinery, and it's still there. I don't know if they still use it, but I guess every now and then it kind of floods.
Oh, it's right below the building, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of in the sub-basement there, underneath the stage. But I just, I don't know, I've heard tales of a ghost story, and I thought maybe if you knew something at the auditorium.
Mm-hmm.
That's a new one on us, but if you...
If you hear anything, let us know, and certainly we'll be able to, I'm sure Ed and I will be able to put our heads together and find some contacts to check into that.
Okay, that'd be terrific.
All right.
I'll look into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. WGN, hello, Richard. You're on the air from Wheaton?
Yep. Hello.
Okay, go ahead.
I was curious, Richard, as to if you heard anything regarding the McCormick Mansion in Winfield.
I was discussing with a reporter who actually came out to Northern to hear my speech at NIU, DeKalb, the possibility of something out there that we had learned about from a student from DeKalb. Are you referring to an article in the paper recently?
That, and I used to be a guard over at Cantigny where the McCormick Mansion resides.
Uh-huh.
Now, which McCormick Mansion are we talking about?
Richard R. McCormick used to own a bunch of land out in Winfield. It's off of Roosevelt Road.
Oh, this is not the Colonel Robert R. McCormick. This is a different McCormick.
Well, it is Robert R. McCormick, but it's the past one. He used to be the editor of the Tribune.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, Colonel McCormick. That's what you're I thought that was out of Cantigny, isn't that?
It is.
Is that the mansion you're talking about?
Yes.
All right, Cantigny or Cantini, depending on how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
Out of the War Memorial there? That mansion you're calling about?
That's correct.
Yeah, that is owned by the Tribune Company.
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, it is open to the public. It's quite a tourist attraction, I guess. And there are offices out there. I guess there's a museum. I don't know, is there a golf course out there?
Yeah, they just put that in last year.
So are you saying you used to work there?
Yeah, I used to be a security guard out there.
What about the ghost story, then? You think there's something to it?
Well, only thing I can say is that one evening while I was out there, there was a light up in one of the rooms. And at night, that place is locked tight. And there's usually no lights left on except for down at the entrance doors.
Now, I happen to know very well the head of the office that runs that place. It's the Colonel McCormick Trust that runs both the mansion and the grounds, and the head of the trust is General Neil Creighton.
Correct. Leo lives on the premise, too.
Well, I know the general, and we've had him on the radio many times. We've never talked about ghosts, but I'll have to check with him and ask him if he's had any experiences with that, or heard any stories. I'll have to give him a call during the day.
Yeah, because if I remember right, Amy died on the premise, and she is buried right next to the house.
Who's that? Is that a McCormick child?
That was his ex-wife.
Oh, really?
His first wife.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, him and her are both buried next to the house.
That I didn't know. All right, we'll look into that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our number is 591-7200 if you'd like to join us. Pam, you're on with Richard Crowe, Ghost Hunter. Hello?
Hello?
Pam, are you there?
Hello, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
And to you.
Hello, Mr. Crowe. I talked to you last year, and I was pretty upset when I talked to you. And I wanted to tell you that we've moved, and I guess the reason I called you is to tell you, because I heard your program earlier when a woman called in, there are things you can do, as far as ghosts, as far as the woman calling in and saying that people were messing with her lock.
The lock, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that I kind of wonder about. But I have found that ghosts do not... I called you last year about asking the difference between ghosts and spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And you can ask and tell ghosts to leave, and they will. That sounds goofy, I know.
No, that's what I suggested, that if she didn't feel comfortable with it herself, the odds were best to have her local clergyman come in to bless the place and take care of things.
Well, and that other person that you were talking to, you asked her about her religious beliefs, and I was scared to death when I talked.
And just about every religious, just about every religion I know of, certainly the part of the clergy training would be to deal with situations like this. So whatever her religion was, I didn't really care to know, but I felt that a clergyman would have been able to help.
Well, but people can know that you can just, you can say this all on your own.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
And you can say, okay, I've had enough of this. Be out of here.
Right, but you have to be firm. You have to believe it. And I'm afraid not everybody has that kind of gumption to be able to do it, to pull it off.
Oh, well, that's what it takes sometimes.
Well, right, but I'm afraid it's not easy to convince somebody to, stand up.
I've never found I was raised very religiously, and I thought this was a joke. I mean, the very first, and I know I sound totally nuts, the very first ghost I ever saw, they swore to God that I gave my pastor gray hairs asking him questions. But, I know for a fact that isn't true. Ghosts do exist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid that upsets a lot of people, but they do. But I've never known any of them to do any tangible things that, unfortunately, I think all they do is upset people. And I still don't think that they have any harm or any malice within them, but are probably misunderstood.
Mm-hmm. That's very much the case. To paraphrase Will Rogers, I never met a ghost I didn't like. I don't really think there are any things as nasty ghosts.
All right, my dear.
We misinterpret them, perhaps, but that's about it.
All right, there's no misinterpreting the clock. Thank you for the call. Richard Crowe, the ghost hunter, is here, and we'll be back in a moment. And I will give his address again if you want to send for the literature that he has available to tell you about his 5-hour haunted tour amongst the cemeteries and other strange places he wanders, both day and night. We'll give you that address here at WGN.
At any given Dominic's, you'll find employees who do everything you'd expect of them, as well as a few things you might not, like returning an occasional lost wallet or purse, or simply taking the time to offer a few kind words. You see, at Dominic's, when we talk about our values, we're referring to more than just our prices. Food for thought from Dominic's.
Besides food for thought, Dominic's gives you food prices worth remembering, like USDA government-inspected fresh fryer drumsticks. Just 39 cents a pound, limit to 5 pounds, please. Or select from assorted flavors of Pepsi, Coke, 7-Up, or Canfield's products. And pages $2.99 each for 12 packs of 12-ounce cans. And don't forget to start saving Dominic's gold stamps for your free Thanksgiving turkey. Collect one stamp for every $5 purchase. Fill 4 certificates and receive a free Jenny-O turkey. Details in the store, food for thought, prices worth remembering at Dominic's.
Okay, Mary, what do you say we tell everyone about the Geo store?
All right, where do you want to start?
Well, we can start by saying that GSI is no ordinary sports car.
Especially under the hood. For instance, it has a 16-valve dual overhead cam engine.
You're supposed to talk about the look.
And a driver's side airbag.
How's it look, Mary?
It even does 0 to 60 in under 9 seconds.
Talk about the colors.
Oh, and it's got this special Scotchgard fabric protector on the seats and trim.
Tell them it comes in aqua and bright yellow.
And the tires, all-season, steel-belted radial.
Oh, mention the shape, Mary, the sporty shape.
And how could I forget to mention the floor console with convenience tray? Let's see. Did I leave anything out?
You were going to tell him it's a great-looking car.
I think that goes without saying.
Obviously.
Visit your local Chevy dealer and get $500 cash back or 7.9% financing for 48 months on a new Geostorm. And with our $600 first-time buyer assistance program, you can save a total of $1,100. The Geostorm. If its looks don't take your breath away, the ride will. Hello, everybody. We're here at Cape Canaveral to talk with the craziest man in communications, Mr. Dean Becker of Becker Beeper.
Hello.
You nut. He's boarding the shuttle to become the first information exchange expert to be shot into space. Are you really going through with it, Dean?
Yes, I am.
You're a total kukla. Can you tell our listeners why you're doing it?
To bring attention to our vibrating digital display pagers.
Wow, you've already got the Becker Beeper, the Becker Clean Air System, the Becker Cellular Phones, and the Becker Answering Service. And now you add a new vibrating digital display pager? Dean, you're a completely unhinged madman.
Yep.
Is there anything else you want the world's Becker fans to know before they blast you into the outer limits?
Just to call 588-3000. We have a special going on.
A special, Dean? You've got to be the Prince of Promo.
Just call 588-3000.
There he goes, once again proving that Dean Becker is the craziest man in communications.
Becker Beeper beepers are priced cheaper at $99. You can't get a better beeper cheaper than from Becker Beeper. Call 588-3000. Becker Beeper for a better beeper cheaper, only $99. 588-3000. Rich Crowe, Ghost Hunter at WGN Chicago, where he's visiting tonight. If you would like to go out with Richard on one of his tours, his address, right, Richard Crowe, C-R-O-W-E, P.O. Box 29054, 29054, Chicago 60629. Chicago 60629. His phone number is 708-499-0300. That's 708-499-0300. Just for a little historical background, here we sit in the waning few minutes of our annual Halloween visit. What is Halloween? How far back does it go? What is the purpose of Halloween, and is there any reason to fear it?
No, Ed, I don't think there's any reason to fear it. It's a great time of the year to appreciate various concepts of the paranormal and think about the idea of survival after death and so on. And Halloween as we know it today in America pretty much goes back to the Druids, goes back to the ancient Celts of Western Europe and the people who gave us Stonehenge and things of that sort. And it's a real popular holiday. In fact, just in our lifetime, Ed, I mean, just in the last 15 years or so, it's amazing, as we talked earlier, how Halloween has become such a gigantic holiday. Not for kids anymore, but for adults. It's a real major adult holiday now to get out and do things and to party, to dress up, and to think about all these concepts.
I understand it's for those who celebrate it, like the pagans, it's their harvest. It's their kind of New Year or harvest time. It's the end of the old year, beginning of the new. Is that accurate?
Right. No, November 1 would have been the first of the year for ancient man.
Really, well, that's today.
And Happy New Year, Ed. And we've also got the situation where, talking about agrarian-based people, the Old Farmer's Almanac, they run their year from November 1. So this is the first year of the new Old Farmer's Almanac.
There is a certain concern in our society today for Satanism and other aberrant behavior of that nature. Is there any linkage between those who celebrate Halloween and Satanism? Is there something there? I mean, there are those who say don't celebrate Halloween, don't dress up, don't acknowledge it, because that's to give in to Satanism. Mm-hmm. Is there linkage there, or is that just a little paranoia on the part of
Halloween was around a long time before the modern concept of Satanism, and certainly the satanic activity in the last few decades certainly is an aberration here, and a twisting, a distortion of concepts that were around for thousands of years. And I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater just because there are some people who twist things and pervert things.
I am going to be hosting a program tonight in cooperation with a Cult Awareness Network. We're having a panel show tonight on cults, and we will be talking about Satanism and a number of others during the course of the program. But since it falls so close to Halloween, I wanted to make sure that there was a certain separation there, and those who perhaps have taken up the practice of Satanism have no right to pervert other people's Halloween.
It's very true, Ed.
What is the history? Do you have any idea what the history of the thing called Devil's Night? I mean, we have no Devil's Night here in Chicago. Yet in Detroit, they have now what amounts to a 3-day period of arson and looting and horror that they attribute to the thing called Devil's Night. Now, is that anything in the history books, or is that an invention of the hooligans of Detroit?
I don't know where that came from, except to say that it seems to be a localized activity here, using, just prior to Halloween. It's like Halloween's not enough for people. We're going to have to expand the holiday a night or two before. But Devil's Night's an amazing concept. I mean, just the idea that it's, everybody goes out and commits acts of arson. It's amazing. How bad was it last night, by the way?
It was rough, from what we understand. We talked to the Detroit Fire Department in the middle of the night. They wouldn't go on the air with us. They said they were plenty busy. And I saw some news tape during the day of a number of fires. So there was an inordinate number of fires last night in Detroit. There were a number of people arrested, most of them young and male. And there'll be some trials. I mean, arson is a felony. It's very hard to prove crime, but I certainly hope they get some of them red-handed. We're about to say goodnight because Paul Harvey is coming up. We're not going to wait until next Halloween to get you back in here. We're overdue for a visit. We always visit 3 or 4 times a year anyway. And since there were a whole lot of calls we didn't get to, I'd like to have you come back in here in a few weeks, maybe on a Friday night.
Sure, especially if we could do a weekend, Ed, and give a lot of the listeners who always complain and say, well, gee, you're on so late. Well, Halloween comes once a year, but sure, we can pick this up and carry it further another weekend.
I would like to do that very much. I want to repeat again, if you'd like to go out with Richard and take one of his 5-hour bus tours, you write to him, Richard Crowe, C-R-O-W-E, and the address is P.O. Box 29054, Chicago 60629. Where does the ghost hunter go after a very busy Halloween?
Well, my Halloween season's going to run hot and heavy all the way up through Christmas or New Year's. I think I'm just going to take off somewhere haunted here for vacation in January.
Really? Now, is there a place to go where you're off duty, or are you always on duty?
Well, to me, just the idea of being off duty means to check out ghosts at my leisure. So you'll be getting a phone call from somewhere exotic, I'm sure, Ed.
Where by the way, is Billy Early's bottle tonight?
Billy Early's bottle's probably levitating around somewhere on the south side.
It is locked up, though.
It is locked up.
It is still in your custody, though, huh?
Yes, indeed. We'll have to talk about that sometime in the future again, too.
The people of Ireland are still not coaxed you into giving it back yet, huh?
Maybe someday.
You ought to maybe go back over there and present it to them. Of course, they're liable to lock you up for having an Irish artifact out of the country, huh?
Well, the UN now has various treaties regarding national treasures like that. I'm not sure if Ireland's going to declare the bottle a national treasure. We'll see.
All right. Richard Crowe, ghost hunter, making his Halloween visit again. Although it's now the 1st of November. A very happy Halloween.
Happy New Year of the ancient Celtic way. Yes.
Thank you, Richard. I'll be seeing you soon.
Thanks, Ed.
Always a pleasure having Richard Crowe on WGN Radio.
Hello, Americans. I'm Paul Harvey. You know what the news is. In a minute, you're going to hear the rest of the story.
You've all heard the term, nobody does it better, haven't you? Well, that's why Pearly Jewelers in downtown Naperville is known as your nobody jeweler. Pearly Jewelers designs and creates jewelry right on their premises at 8 West Jefferson, and with 3 generations of expertise, indeed, nobody does it better. Pearly Jewelers guarantees the finest craftsmanship at the lowest prices on every piece of jewelry they create. When you say to yourself, nobody can do that, you'd be right. Nobody can offer the finest quality at the lowest prices, and it's Pearly Jewelers, your nobody jeweler. Remember, when you hear nobody does it better, think of Pearly Jewelers at 8 West Jefferson in downtown Naperville, 708-357-3357, or 1-800-779-GEMS.
We've got some fire equipment moving in South Shore tonight. 82nd and Coles. There's a fire reported in the building there. Occupied frame building. Luckily, no injuries have been reported. But if you live in the area around 82nd and Coles and you hear the sirens tonight, that's what's going on. Nothing worse than having a fire in the middle of the night. Hopefully, you have a smoke detector. Last night, early this morning, when this program was over, I was out wandering around and I bumped into a house that was on fire on Mason Avenue, around 4000 north on Mason, just north of Irving Park. And there were several people that were injured there, and I had nothing more horrible than standing in the street at 3 or 4 in the morning and watching somebody's house go up. So it's now an extra alarm, a 2-alarmer. 82nd and Coles is now up to an extra alarm. So again, I beseech you, as I have for so many years, never go to bed without the protection of a smoke detector. As I watched the firemen last night work very quickly to put out that fire in that bungalow on North Mason Avenue, and I couldn't help but think this is somebody's home. And now it's been lost. You want to avoid that at all costs, which means be very careful. But you also want to survive, God forbid, should it happen to you. Smoke detectors, every home. Don't go to bed without one.
Hey, the respected J.D. Power Dependability Index is out. The periodic evaluation of automobiles after they have been on the road for 5 years. Which of all of the cars are most dependable after 4 or 5 years in use? General Motors. General Motors makes the most dependable of all American cars. Better than Ford, better than Chrysler. I know that GM cars are more reliable. I've driven them for as long as I can remember. And the new ones are superior to anything ever. I know it. I know it from experience. And now the world has heard it from J.D. Power and Associates. The mark of excellence. Now, the rest of the story. It was as though the angel of death himself had descended upon the countryside. Not a sound. Not the song of a bird, nor the chirp of a cricket, nor even the rustle of breeze in the trees. Just the terrible, breathless stillness, and the black of the night, and a pale moon peering down through shrouds of clouds, and the village the same, dark and dead and still, as though it had been suddenly abandoned. Well, in a sense, that was so, even though huddled inside the hovels, cringing in corners in the blackness, were the townspeople themselves. But they were silent and afraid, and they were staring into the dark, anticipating the arrival of them. And so important, as the village priest had instructed them, every fire and every ember had been extinguished, every hearth was cold, for anything at all warm or bright would attract the enemy, the merciless enemy, the invisible enemy. And then at once, just as every heart had plunged to the depths of that dark, cold, quiet hell, a cry ripped a hole in the night, the human cry of the village priest. It was time. That was the expected signal, the moment for which the villagers had been waiting. For out in the countryside, the priest had begun kindling a fire to mark the place at which all must gather. And slowly, silently, the townspeople emerged from their dark homes, one by one, drawn to the luminous blot on the hillside where the priest stood. And as the people drew nearer, the bonfire grew larger and larger until it had become an immense towering column of flames. And seeing it, the villagers began to shout, and many of them screamed, all in obedience to their priest's prescription. For should any precaution be left out, the invisible invaders would surely seize them. And this is the rest of the story. What the village priest had told his people was that the spirits of all who had died over the past year had become restless. Those spirits were now roaming far and wide, searching for places to dwell, searching for bodies of the living which they might invade and possess. Therefore, every home must be made dark and cold and uninviting to the uninvited, and a bonfire must be lighted, and a ceremony must be performed. And as a lesson to ambitious ghosts, any among the living appearing possessed were to be sacrificed in the fire. And oh yes, further to frighten the furtive spirits, the villagers had been instructed to wear outlandish clothing and anything else to create the illusion of evil. Did you hear that? The villagers were instructed by their priest to wear outlandish clothing, to wear anything that might create the illusion of evil. And so effective was this ceremony considered that the village priest decreed that it should be repeated every year at the end of harvest time, when everybody would dress up in such outlandish clothing to keep the evil spirits away. And the Celtic ritual persists to this day. In light-hearted celebration of those dark hours in the history of Ireland 5 centuries before Christ, when it was done in dead earnest. course, today we call it Halloween. And now you know the rest of the story.
And that's probably the best way in the world to end our Halloween show for this year. I hope you enjoyed War of the Worlds. I hope you enjoyed my annual Halloween visit with Richard Crowe, the ghost hunter. Lord knows there are not enough hours, because I really had tons and tons of recorded material here we just never got around to. But there are other nights and other shows, and the stuff is still good. So you may hear it, it won't be Halloween, but you may be hearing some scary things from time to time during the next few weeks or months if you listen late night to WGN in Chicago. A quick plug for the night. The Cult Awareness Network is opening its nationwide conference at the Marriott Lincolnshire Resort today. Tonight we have a panel of people coming in who know anything and everything there is about cultism in this country. We also have the former federal prosecutor who put Lyndon LaRouche behind bars coming in. We have an expert on Satanism coming in. We have a number of experts on such things as Scientology. So I hope you'll tune in tonight and find out just what impact these things are having on our society and our country and perhaps our world on WGN in Chicago. That's about it. I want to thank my producer, Mitch Rosen. And Steve King is off tonight. Let's see who the substitute announcer is, the one who cut me off last night. Maybe I just keep the program until 5:30. Maybe I won't let anybody else talk. I do have that power, being the senior person on duty around here, and I guess I could refuse to release the airwaves. I could keep control. I could use my influence. I guess I could. Don't think I will, but I could if I wanted.
Ed?
Yes?
Are you going to give me, let me take over at this point, I suppose, huh? Good for you.
I'm giving
you
it
did
some
the right
thought.
thing. You did the right thing. Let me commend you.
I'm giving it some thought.
I do commend you.
Well, thank you. I do deserve to be
This
commended.
cult awareness thing, that is, I was just reading something last Sunday's paper. Did you see that article?
Yes.
It's
a frightening thing.
Lots of terrible things happen around Halloween. I'm wondering if that's why they...
Well, I think it's probably the time of the year when they feel they'll have the most impact. But there are things going on all year long. And
but there's a spike there, a bit of a spike around the Halloween season or holiday or whatever you want to call this.
Probably so.
A few more of these incidents, animal ritual sacrificing and things like that.
There have been animal mutilations all over the country and sacrificing. And I guess in the last couple of years they have found a number of sacrificial sites in farmer fields and forest preserves just around the Chicago area. I guess in the last couple of years about 75 different ritual sites
here
have been found in the Chicago area. Yep. And it covers a whole list of different kinds of organizations. The Cult Awareness Network, which is a national organization, is headquartered here in Chicago. Their annual conference, which opens today, is called Cults, Perpetrators and Victims. It says the goal of the 1990 Cult Awareness Network Conference is to provide accurate information and guidance regarding destructive cults, including deceptive recruitment techniques, mind control, exploitation, identification of criminal acts and human rights violations, and alternatives for intervention and rehabilitation. And they are bringing in a list of experts from all over the country, including John Markham, former assistant U.S. attorney, who successfully prosecuted Lyndon LaRouche for federal conspiracy, mail fraud, and tax evasion, and put him away. Matter of fact, here are the people we have coming in tonight.
Well, we heard this a moment ago. We heard you do this already.
Cynthia Kisser.
You're gonna do it again?
No, I'm going to mention a couple of other people that are coming in. Cynthia Kisser, who's the executive director of the Cult
Why do I let him get away
Network,
with it?
and Mr. Markham, who I just mentioned,
yes.
And Jerry Simandl, who is a Satanism expert. That's all I'll plug.
Oh, okay.
You'll have to tune in tonight.
No, I'm sure it's going to be a fascinating show, and I will be listening to part of it at least as I am putting my program together
Well,
tonight.
I would be listening. You know, the media...
Scary. It's very scary.
Unfortunately...
And it seems, I guess, that teenagers are the ones who are most often victimized by this. They're, for whatever reasons, more interested in it than some of the rest of us. And
they're very influenced. They're very influenced.
Yeah.
But they're not just teenagers. There are a lot of, unfortunately, there are a lot of people with money and with power. Remember the Bhagwan?
Yeah.
Remember all those people who gave away all their worldly possessions?
Sure. And well, cults are one thing, I guess, and the thing that disturbs me more is the Satanism. And I guess that wouldn't bother me, except that they seem to cause pain for other people, for innocent victims, and of course, then that's at that point you have to object.
I got a newspaper in the mail today called White Patriot, the worldwide voice of the Aryan people. And it says, distributed by the Illinois Knights in Chicago, and the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And they're selling us white power Ku Klux Klan T-shirts. They also sell brass-handled KKK knives, KKK pins. There's a message here from the Grand Wizard. And the note that came with it is these newspapers are spread all over the southwest side of Chicago, it says. And,
I mean, is this somebody trying to alert you to this or trying to recruit you? Or what?
No, it was a listener alerting me to this outfit and sending me a copy of this newspaper, which I will show to the panel members tonight.
You consider the Klan a cult?
Oh, yeah, I would think so, yeah. I think they do, too.
Well, it's certainly low membership, if that's the...
Low intelligence. I don't know what their membership is, and there's more than one clan. There's a whole bunch of them.
Sure.
And they have strange names, and they wear, strange clothing.
They're very kind of exalted names. It's almost as if they lack self-esteem.
I remember
so they get these names that give them a little bit of a ego boost or something.
You remember the Woody Allen comedy bit? He said he accidentally went to a KKK meeting where these guys were so explosive they were wearing fitted sheets.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Funny bit, but it still represents a counterculture kind of behavior. It's scary stuff.
And in difficult economic times, strange groups like these tend to catch on a little bit more.
It amazes me how many people are disaffected, who are unconnected. And it's like the Nazis. Why would anybody want to be a Nazi? But these people
I'm sure there's a reason for wanting to do that.
Well, these people have low self-esteem, and I guess one of the reasons they join up is they need something to belong to.
Yeah, precisely. Listen, we need to talk to Larry Schreiner. He's on our line.
Yeah, we've got an alarm fire, so here now is Miss Coleman, and I'm out of here.
Thanks, Ed. And here is Larry Schreiner. Hi, good morning to you, Mr. Schreiner.
Good morning, Jan. It's been quite a morning and night, along with Inverness and this fire.
Yeah, I heard those reports yesterday from Inverness, yeah.
First of all, let's do that fire, Jan. A 211 alarm fire, a number of homes on fire, 80th and South Coles, C-O-L-E-S. However, it does sound, from listening to the Chicago Fire Department, that they are gaining the upper hand on that extra alarm fire. The chief wasted no time in requesting more help.
That's a residential block, and you're saying several homes on that block? Or
That's what it sounds like. I have to tell you the truth, Jan. I've been working on this Inverness story, and I got a little punchy and got a little unconscious at the same time. You have to, even everybody has to close their eyes once in a while, but we'll do our best to keep you...
Ken tells me the buildings over there are pretty tight together, pretty close together, There's not much space between them.
That is the problem so often on these fires, Jan. I've been at fires where, when I say I'm not exaggerating, sure, I'm carrying some heavy equipment, but the idea is walking through a gangway. On my side is a recorder box, but sometimes I cannot fit down the gangways of these houses because they are so close together. So what happens quite often when the fire department arrives and they know they have two going, because that's usually what they end up getting by the time they get there, they just try to what we refer to as protect the exposures. For the civilians, that means they presume that the two buildings that are on fire are going to stay on fire, and they put the water curtain or they start spraying the buildings on both sides. That becomes the big concern. Then once they get them protected, but they basically just presume that they're going to lose what they have. But I've had them where the buildings are actually up against each other, and
it's a bad way to build, I guess.
But I I think Eddie, if Eddie's still with us, Eddie grew up on the southeast side.
Eddie, are you there still? I don't know if he's
Yes, I'm right here. I'm right here.
Those buildings, now I don't mean exactly this block, Eddie, but you grew up on the southeast side, and GN was saying the buildings are built so close together. A lot of those buildings, and let's eliminate South Cole so we don't get any phone calls. But on that southeast side, Eddie, aren't a lot of those buildings maybe 100 years old?
No, depending on where you're at, sure, because if you go way over east, it can be that way. It's a very old neighborhood. But you also have, anytime you have a frame building that's got years and years and years and years of paint and varnish and wax and everything, and it's been pretty dry lately, too. So once one of these things gets